Excuse me, I'll officially call the meeting to order. And I will start by entertaining a motion to approve the minutes.
A motion to approve the minutes from August 17th.
Yes. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, so we got that part done.
Yes. We also need to do a roll call, Madam
And
Chairman.
then roll call.
Shauna Taylor,
Here. And
Stuart Smith,
Here?
Jane Seda,
here.
Chelsea Partridge, Ron Felino, Tom Hermanson, Don Mays.
Here. Sorry, skipped over roll call. One of our biggest conversations for today is, in our new business area, is the bed board feedback on the Economic Development Action Plan. I personally would prefer to have more than 4 of us here to discuss that because it is a rather large request from staff, but I'd entertain conversation about that from y'all.
You mean whether or not we want to have more than 4 people here?
To discuss, we could have a conversation about like the calendar. I don't have a problem starting that conversation, but the feedback on the Economic Development Action Plan, I think we might be better served if we had the majority of the board here. Because we're missing 3, and that's a lot of input.
I think the only caveat is if, as I see the proposal of meeting maybe once a quarter or whatever the case may be, as if we do push things off because of lack of participation, we're just going to push things off. So that's my only concern.
Absolutely. I think I'm willing to move it 1 meeting, but not more than 1 meeting.
Fair enough.
If we end up, then we have a conversation. If we have 2 meetings in a row that board member can't mean, that we need to have a different conversation with that board member.
Right.
That it's just not working with their calendar.
Right.
But if we also, as a group, as we get into the calendar conversation, talk about, let's have a meeting in January, then we're only really pushing
Yeah. I think that's the
6,
best
8
idea.
weeks versus like we're having a meeting in March and we're
Right.
pushing
Right.
months worth of time on this conversation.
Yeah.
We are officially almost in the, we'll circle back to that next year time of the year anyway for everybody. So I don't think there's anything, I think we can do that comfortably and then make sure that we have a better attendance for that conversation because it is a pretty impactful thing. So I will entertain a motion to push the item 2 on the board matters to the January meeting, which we'll set. And then from there, we can look at the dates of when we're thinking about having meetings.
I'll make the motion to push that discussion to the January meeting.
I'll second the motion.
Does that need to be a roll call vote, or can we just do ayes?
I think you can do ayes and nays if you'd
Okay.
like.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, so that decision's made. Look at us, getting things done. I want to thank staff for the information we had requested on the CRA and the debt memo. Those were very helpful and informative and gave us an idea of who is in that district. So that's really helpful. Thank you for that, and I appreciate the hard work that went into that. Our next biggest conversation would be discussing meetings for the 2024 cycle, for lack of a better way of putting it. And I think we all agree that our first meeting should be in January. Does staff have any input on preference or timing for when it's best to put it into the city's calendar for space and time and staff?
Yeah, good question. Thank you. As I recall, when we established tonight's meeting at our initial meeting, I think it was generally pretty good for everybody's calendar, and I think that's true for the staff too as well. I think this Thursday, the second Thursday of the month, is generally pretty good. So I would, if it works for the board, I would recommend that we target the second Thursday in January. And as the board may recall, we suggested we would meet quarterly. So if it January, then it would be April, July, and October.
David, I guess I would ask, because you have more insight to the body of work, right? The role of this committee and in relationship to what the staff needs, what the council needs from us as deliverables. So my question is, knowing that, does staff have a recommendation that says, hey, look, maybe every other month is better than once a quarter?
Yeah, I believe this was briefly discussed at the board's initial meeting, and as I recall, that was a decision that the board made was quarterly. Given that, from a staff perspective, there are some weighty issues that we need to be this board needs to be. I would like to see this board weigh in on. One of them is the Economic Development Action Plan. I mean, another document that we need to be looking at potentially is an update to the CRA plan. So that is and those are both, those are no small tasks, either one of those. So if the board feels like, from a staff perspective, we can meet as often or as frequently or as infrequently as the board likes. But given the weight of these issues that are out there, if the board feels like every 2 months would be more appropriate, I mean, I think from a staff perspective we can handle that. But I don't want to impose my thinking onto the board. And Todd can weigh in on this as well, but I don't recall since this is such a new advisory board, the council really hasn't addressed other things that they would like to see this board deal with. But Todd, as the city manager, can certainly just talk to that.
Am I correct in my recollection that the board said quarterly or as needed, or quarterly and as needed? Mm-hmm. If that's the case, when those pressing things come up, they can be the and as needed parts
Right.
of it. So, for instance, I've heard from some CRA board members that are talking about items coming up to the CRA board that they're going to want your board's input on. That board won't be meeting until maybe in December. I don't know if they will or not, but that could be a reason for them to say, hey, we need to have this business board meet sooner. And that's when you would poll them and see if we could put an as-needed meeting together. I don't see a problem with having regularly scheduled intervals at however it pleases you, but those kinds of emergent issues can be taken care of by the way you word it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So as a follow-up, so I could support quarterly as a standing meeting and then as needed, for sure. So one of the curious questions is, what's the interface? Like, what's the mechanism between this group and the council?
A recommendation memo would be, well, to either the CRA board or the council. So the clerk will record in the minutes what the board's recommendations. You might make a motion for a recommendation, and it would get approved. And as that's worded, it would be presented to the appropriate body.
I mean, it'd be very similar to how we handle our other advisory boards to the council. And as an example, the Planning and Zoning Board. And as Todd described, that's what we do. This board will make a recommendation, be voted on, and we would provide that to the council either at the next agenda packet, or we can maybe even, depending on the nature of the recommendation, we could issue it directly to the council, a freestanding recommendation to the council. So, but that would be the interfaces. Specific recommendations coming out of this board, staff would put it into a memo format and put it into the hands of the council.
And it's really no different from the way you make a recommendation for something from staff. You made a couple of recommendations for information last time that made it to the minutes and made it into this packet. So that the minutes is your method. The
And
recommendation
if
minutes.
council or the CRA board wants us to review something, they can request that it goes to us, correct?
Yes, so then that would make the council minutes, and then staff obviously would coordinate the meeting and make that an action item and include those minutes in it.
And do we have the ability to workshop instead of meet if like we want to dig into something in a more workshop mode versus meeting mode, correct? Like, if we get into some heavy lifting on the development action plan where we as a group decide, yes, we want to do more, that may be better suited in a workshop format, and we can do that also if we choose to, correct?
Go ahead.
Yeah, I think yes. I mean, that's what we do with our other advisory. I'm kind of comparing you to our
Right.
other advisory boards. If the Planning and Zoning Board wants to hold a workshop, that's what we would do. Obviously, as a workshop, it'd be a little less formal, a little bit more working, kind of roll up your sleeves kind of approach. But yeah, definitely, if this board wants to workshop something, I don't see a problem with that.
Yeah, because that may be helpful for us to know as we dig into some meatier conversations, like especially on the CRA, if they have recommendations that are going to take, since we're governed by sunshine, we can't have out-party conversations, but we can have a workshop in which we can kind of hash things out as a group versus the more formal board meeting, if we choose to.
Yeah, I would think so.
It's more style over substance, I think, because it still has to be publicly noticed, available to anybody who wants to watch.
Absolutely.
It just could be a longer meeting, more
Right.
gritty details, so, yeah, it's style over substance.
David, Todd, is there ever a time when you workshop with others? So you workshop with council, you workshop with another group on a shared issue that you're trying to resolve?
The code refers to workshop meetings of the city council, not specifically of boards that I've seen, but the board can hold a meeting and call it a workshop meeting. There's a restriction that places on you, though, when the council holds a workshop meeting, the restriction is you can discuss no other items,
Right.
and you cannot make an official action. No motion can come out of that. No recommendation can come out of that.
So you have to take what you did in the workshop, bring it back to your regular meeting, go
Yes.
through that mechanism to make the recommendation.
Right.
Got
So if the board wants to do that, just be aware that you're walking into that restriction.
Got it.
Another way to do it, and again, this is more style, is you could schedule an agenda item to be a workshop item on a business board agenda that is, don't call it workshop, call it discussion of or deep dive review into, whatever, if you know it's going to be a meaty item. I think if you put the word workshop on it, somehow you'll tie your hands on what you can do
Got
at
it.
that meeting.
Yeah, I've also seen where you do the workshop the hour before
You could do that,
the board
too.
meeting, and then roll it all together if it comes to that, just so we know what our options are, I think is.
Yeah.
So as we come into different conversations, how we want to approach them as a group, everybody understands what our options are. I think that's really important.
Right.
So that if somebody's like, yeah, we've got more here to discuss, then we need to hash through this, we can take it that way. Okay, great. So how does everybody feel about the second Thursday as our standing quarterly in the first month of each quarter, because we'd be starting in January, for our standing meetings, and then we will add meetings as needed? Does anybody have any concerns on that?
No concerns? No?
All right.
No. And so since we made the motion last time, right, we're just kind of
We have
clearing
to
the
just
air,
make,
right? So,
somebody just entertain a motion
right. So the second Thursday.
of the first month of the quarter.
Okay. That's what we will do.
We didn't.
I think we
No,
did
we
last time, didn't
discussed
we?
it as a possibility.
got it.
But we didn't set it.
Got it.
Okay. I make a motion that this board meets every second Thursday of the first month of each quarter.
And as necessary.
Yep,
And as
and
necessary.
as
Perfect.
needed. Yep.
And can I have a second?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. I noticed we also have a member of the audience. Did you need to fill out a comment card, or did you have anything to share, or were you just joining us for audience today? Just wanted to make sure you had the opportunity to, if you had anything you needed to share. All right. No problem. Because there's a comment card that needs to be filled out before I can recognize you. So I wanted to make sure that that was done if needed.
So Don, just before we leave the calendar, I was curious, are there from us, David, from your perspective, are there other deliverables that we need to be aware of in 2024 that we need to calendar? And what are they and when?
Yeah, I'm not aware of the council specifically directing this board for any deliverables.
Got it.
Now, I will say this, that there has been some informal discussions, at least at the staff level, about deliverables that this board could be considering and be involved in. But sitting here this evening, the board has not, the CRA board nor the council has specifically said this is what we want to see from the board in 2024.
And we also have an election between now and the next meeting.
Well, we had the election. We
We did? Okay.
Yes, we will have a new council member, and she in her campaign platform did have language about business assistance, helping small businesses, helping local businesses. So I expect we'll hear more about that at the council level and hear what ideas she has.
Okay.
That
Great.
could change what you do.
Yeah, I just, kind of just as a discussion item, just amongst us, I think that the, you know, as I mentioned earlier, the CRA plan, in my opinion, needs an update.
Got it.
And that is a plan that is critical to this city. Now that our CRA is really starting to run on all 8 cylinders, we're really generating a lot of money. There's going to be a little bit more involvement in creating a CRA budget every year, and that could potentially be something this board could be involved in. Todd and I have just been discussing that at the staff level, but that would be something that I could see occurring.
And that's what the one council member or board member talked to me about, is more about the lifetime of the CRA, which it sunsets in 2040, so we've got a few years left. It's not quite reached its 50% mark, but while we have it, we need to make as much hay while that sun is shining as possible. So this board's input on that, I know the CRA board's going to be asking for, not just this year or the next 5 years, but for its lifetime. Let's make some plans for how we intend to use that, and I think they're going to benefit from your input on that.
I have a question about the CRA. I was looking over some of the paperwork, and I could be wrong, but one of the funds that I think it's kind of limited would be like marketing and recruitment. Do you not look at the ROI for how much you can make with marketing and recruitment, like just based on like search engine? Because it's a different world now, based upon like the year you started the CRA here. And it's so much more profitable to use those funds because they're not tangible, of course, but your ROI is excellent when it comes to, you know what I'm talking about? That
No,
part?
I do. I understand exactly
Okay.
what you're talking about. You know, historically, the City of Cape Canaveral CRA funds, the CRA board has wanted to spend those dollars on concrete brick and mortar projects. And we've really not, although we have the ability to spend dollars, CRA funds on marketing, on even staff, administrative assistance, those are allowed in our plan. We haven't done that yet.
Okay.
So,
Well, there's some history about this too,
Yes.
in the state and in Brevard County specifically. A lot of things have, some of those things have come under fire in certain jurisdictions. For instance, community policing initiatives. Spending CRA dollars on that has come under fire. Funding staff has come under fire in Brevard County. Brevard County Commission in general, a couple years ago, really wanted to pull back the reins on CRAs and how they're expending money, and wanting to be careful about how you choose to do things, I think, that don't directly benefit the CRA area, how it's viewed. And I would say, I'll go out on a limb a little bit and say that the poster child project is you remove blight by your actions of the CRA. There's a building was there, it looked horrible, now it looks great. That's always going to get a thumbs up. But if you're doing something about, well, we think this enhances the feel of the city and the quality of life in general by having an event,
yeah.
those things are harder to prove that you're fighting blight with that. So that's why we've always been very careful, as Dave said, to put our money into brick and mortar projects, infrastructure projects that are going to put a new sign on a person's project or fix a facade or something like that. Actual physical, visible difference.
And I will follow up with what Todd is saying, is that you can ask yourself, well, why do we care what Brevard County thinks? This is a charter county, and so what that means is the county authorizes the city of Cape Canaveral to have a CRA, and they give us those powers. So whereas we all heard the old saying, where one giveth, one can taketh away.
Yeah.
So we have to at least consider at the county level, what their views are on how we spend our CRA dollars. I'm not saying we have to 100% march in that line, but we have to be at least considerate.
Yeah, so one of the last big purchases of the CRA was the building next door, bought the property, tore the building down, and it's now being considered as part of the concept for the Civic Hub plan. Before we even entertained the idea of making an offer to that property owner, staff contacted District 2 Commissioner and said, want to make sure you're not going to be fighting us on this, right? You're going to be in lockstep, you're going to support this, right? And I think that's smart politically. And of course, and that was Mr. Lober, and he said, yeah, that's a great idea. That's the kind of stuff that CRA should be doing. So we would continue to keep up the relationship with Brevard County to make sure we have their support in what we do with our CRA.
Yeah, there may be a time where we start considering marketing and paying for staff. But it's, historically, those are things that we really haven't looked at.
Okay.
There was a town in Brevard where staff was paid for by CRA, or at least partially, and as a result of the investigations and determinations by the county and the state, that person had to pay back that money to the CRA.
All right, well, let's keep it.
So obviously the CRA drives the majority of kind of the function of this, but when I think about scope and purpose, or vice versa, purpose and scope, we have some very significant economic projects, I guess is the best way to put it, coming to the city of Cape Canaveral with the aquarium. So what role does this board play in saying, hey, city, we ought to be paying attention, or is that all council work? And they're just asking us for advice on stuff like that?
Yeah, you're not beholden to city council for your marching papers.
Okay.
This board can take initiatives of its own to make a recommendation to the council or staff to do something. Like the aquarium, for instance, you mentioned that, which is outside of our CRA area. You obviously wouldn't make a recommendation that we use any CRA funds for the aquarium because it's outside of the area.
Right.
But you might say, aside from CRA, we would like to have more engagement with the aquarium, and I don't know what ways that might encompass, but you might come up with a list of how we can assist, promote, help them in their fundraising efforts or whatever.
Because I can only imagine the possibility of economic development for this city with the arrival of the aquarium,
Yeah.
right? And you guys are thinking through that. Somebody's thinking through that, right?
Sure.
Like runoff businesses as well, even transportation, like there's
Yeah.
so many ways to
Everything.
create revenue.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the market's reacting to it right now. It's not even built, and the market's reacting to it.
Yeah.
That's a major driver of the hotels that we're seeing going in.
Yep.
And so, yeah, it's definitely, we can see what's coming our way, and it's this board can play an interesting role because we have, we all know that there's a group of people. I can't name names or point fingers, but I think that there's a certain segment of our community that just doesn't want any growth and likes things as they are. That's an interesting concept for this board to discuss. Is that something that is that a philosophy that this board would like to support? Or is this board would like to support an alternate philosophy? So those are all questions that this board can ask and wrestle with and make recommendations to the city council on. I think
part of that also comes out of the development action plan, because when you read through that, and I did read the whole thing, when you read through that, there is a lot of conversation of ways to do things, not to do things. There's things that are no longer relevant that are in that plan because it is 10, 12 years old. But there are things that are still actively relevant
Yeah.
in it that are still, so, that's why I really want a larger contingency here to talk through that, because there is some great nuggets in that report that I think
Right.
could be still utilized, and some things that are not applicable. And I think that combination of, that gives us a kind of like, this is our action plan, and then these are the scope at which we're gonna start looking at things and issues, and gives us our kind of strategy of where we wanna go forward.
Yeah, we can focus on what to kind of deter.
Yeah.
I have a question though. So 2040 is in 17 years. So I don't know. I mean, there are properties like when you drive down A1A that are like for rent or whatever, and like they look like they would look a lot nicer if they got a tenant, but they don't have tenants. So if we don't do something like before the CRA and like ends to combat the blight, then the county can come in, right, and do it themselves. Like, what happens?
The county doesn't get the CRA. What they get is that increment money back that they were giving to us from that year forward. And so like, let's say at the year 2040, the CRA is bringing in, I'm just going to make a number and say it's $15 million a year in the CRA. Half of that's the county money. That's $7.5 million of county money will go stay with them every year. I don't think they would be investing that in Cape Canaveral
Yeah,
at that
they
point.
wouldn't. Probably not.
Don't expect that.
We
Yeah.
would just be stuck with what we had at 2040.
So we want to put as much into it as we
Yeah.
can, but what
Right.
time we have.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And
With
that's-
smart
Light and all that,
projects.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's part of the reason why the council wanted to appoint this board to be a recommending board for the CRA. They want your thoughts on that. Back to Board Member Smith's question about the aquarium and what you can do. This board can, for example, request a presentation from the zoo to this board and a Q&A. What can we do to help? Kind of a thing. You could make that a task for the January meeting, and we'll try to set that up for you. We'd be glad to do that.
I'm sure they'd be glad to come.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think before we adjourn, developing the agenda for the 11th of January would be something obviously to do. So the other thing is, and it's really interesting, because I'm staring at sun, space, and sea, right? I also know that this city, to my chagrin, I'll just be very frank about that the space between just does not resonate with me, right? It's almost representative of the transient nature of Cape Canaveral sometimes. This city is the space between where I work and where I live, right? For many people, that's what this is. Can this board think through how we brand the economic development image of this community? Keeping in mind that there are boundaries that are already established with the moniker, we're not going to change the moniker, right? It is what it is. But can we brand this city? And I'm just going to think out loud for a second. So if you think about the viability of this city, where it's uniquely positioned for many, many people, this is the very first city they see when they come into Brevard County, right? Because they come in off this road. And to have a brand or an image or a position for this city, and I'm not saying what that is, but I can imagine a whole bunch of stuff, a mecca for small businesses, especially in support of the aquarium, and what we could do with that kind of opportunity. Can this board make those kinds of recommendations to say, hey, from an economic development perspective, this is how we should position this city, this is how we should brand the city?
Yeah, I'm going to jump on that one. I'm going to kind of echo what your chairwoman said just a little bit ago. I think a lot of the things, the questions you're asking and the initiatives you'd like to take or potentially take are going to flow out of your economic development action plan.
Yep.
That is going to give you a mechanism, a framework, thank you, to create what's important and what's not important and how you attain those goals that you deem as important. So, I think we're speaking frankly here, right?
Yeah.
So rather than just shotgun at different ideas and things, I think if we can follow a framework,
Yep.
that I think everything can flow out of that. my opinion and my thought.
Yeah, but it's work that's been discussed and somebody's put a lot of effort into it, and so we need to build on that.
Yeah, and I've heard comments about the branding, the city's branding, similar to what you've mentioned over the years too. And even when it was new, some people didn't like it. Brands are meant to be replaced and redone.
Right.
You don't have to stick with the same brand that you had 10, 15 years ago. The city council wanted a branding. We didn't have a branding at that time. Hired a company to do that. I forget how much the whole thing cost, $10,000 or $15,000 was the whole thing at the time.
Right.
And they came up with that and.
Yeah, because it's currently, it's part of the Economic Development Action Plan. I knew it was in here, I just couldn't remember where.
Yeah,
It was
just-
Action 17, which was create a city brand. So in January, when we walk through this document and talk about what do we want to keep and what do we want to go forward, I don't know whether we really need to bring in a consultant and redo a whole new plan. We may be able to take this plan and say what hasn't been accomplished or what needs to be renewed versus spending city money to bring in a consultant, even though I actually know this consultant, but bring in a consultant to do the work. We may be able to do it ourselves in that
Sure,
meeting as
absolutely.
we walk through that plan. And so that's where I would say, take the time between now and the January meeting and really dig
Really
into it.
dig into it, yeah.
And I'll, if we can send a note to the members who aren't here so that they are fully prepared, that's what I'd like to do in that January meeting. And plan on being here a little bit more than an hour, because it's gonna
Sure.
take that. It may, if we, sorry, Scott, so that we can really dig through those action items and come to the meeting with, these are my top 5 things that I think are
Yeah.
really
Right.
important
Yeah.
out of this plan, that I'd like to start with these 5. So if we all, I think that's a great way to do it, is pick your top 5, and then we can compare notes and say, these are the actions that either need to be redone, like the branding, or these are the actions that we haven't done I don't see that the city did this.
Right.
And
Or things have changed.
Or
to-
things have
to your
changed,
point,
and,
right?
you know,
It's been a
like,
long time.
because there is a whole section in here about improving signage, and there's a section in here about cityscapes, and there's a development of the CRAs in here, and how to better use that. So all those conversations are already in this framework. So I think if we start with that, I think that's going to give us direction so that we can, we'll still do this through the conversation, we'll still weave through the conversation, but it allows us to have some bumpers on either side so that we can move forward and not get too down a rabbit hole.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I appreciate that. The other thing I know that's happening is that the Space Coast Economic Development Commission, Linda Weatherman and her team have spent a good part of 9 months on this branding, and they are launching that, I believe, on the 12th, the day, I think it's the 12th of
It was the
January?
24th.
24th? Yeah, so.
I think it's January 24th.
So we'll have that information, what the county is planning on doing with branding. And I love Linda's words, right, is if you don't tell people who you are, other people will. Right?
Might as well control the narrative.
Yeah, exactly, so.
Just a little bit of weeds on the branding before we leave that. It might be helpful for this board to receive some information on the trademarks. So we've had to register and continue re-register the trademarks that we use along with that tagline. If the board would find it useful, I think you would, to know how much those trademarks cost us and when is it due again.
Sure.
Yeah, that'd be great.
That could give us some timing information.
Did you hire a marketing firm or specialist last time? Is that what you did?
Yes.
And what was that?
It was Prismatic out of Orlando.
Oh, no, what year?
I'm
Like,
sorry.
how long ago was that? What year?
I want to say 10 to 12 years ago. Oh. Maybe more.
This plan was done in 2010. I think it was like
Oh,
12.
marketing plan?
It was before I got
No,
The branding.
the development action
County
plan was done in
development
10.
action
I want to
plan,
say it was like 12-ish.
Oh, they did the whole thing. I'm talking about rebranding. Did you have a specialist come
Yeah,
in? Like,
yes.
okay, so
That-
just for like the logos, okay.
I
Just
wanna say that was 10 to 12 years
Isolated,
ago.
you work together, okay, same, the same group, okay.
Yeah.
So a lot of those things are still relevant, like you had said, but yeah, there's a lot of things that have to be kind of cut out.
So if we can record that, Renee, that we want to bring back the, what you got there? The trademark information, when's it due and how much it costs?
The other question that I would like to know is, and I don't know, is I know at one point, because Dave, I know you have more than one role right now. And I know at one point there was a role that was specifically just economic development. And does the city manager have any input on whether or not they feel that this needs to be an individual staff role, or if this, from a staff perspective, or if, because there's so much core work done, it can be done? Because I know in the past, because that person who was in that role was out in the community, going to events and things like that as part of their role, and I didn't know if that was something that,
I remember that
as you've
guy.
hybrided the roles, if you feel that needs to go back that way, or if you're happy with where it is.
No, I've been thinking a lot more about that recently, about going back to an individual doing that. And of course, the reason it wasn't done at the time was a cost savings initiative.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the talent on the workforce was still there that was doing it. It's just there was, we felt we could continue to do things. But I think you're right. I think getting out and about doesn't happen as much as it used to. And having that one focal point resource for businesses to come to is probably not as simple as it was before. So I've been thinking about that, but I've also been thinking about the fact that we have added a couple new positions in the last couple of years, and we did have to increase our taxes this last time, not only for that, but also because of inflation. Everybody had to, find more revenue. It could be something that comes out of this board's output, the recommendation also. Timing is going to be important. I see that person as likely being critical to the success of the CRA as well. And, if you're going to build something cool in the CRA, you want something cool to inhabit that building. And, yeah, I've been thinking a lot more about that is the answer, yeah.
Because it struck me the other day when I was reading through the plan that was one of the core parts of this plan for the actionability of the deliverables that were coming out of
Yeah.
the advisory board, was that there was a staff person, not to diminish anything that the current staff is doing in any way. It's just to say, you only have so many hours in the day, and code enforcement generally wins.
Code enforcement,
Building.
building, rezoning.
Zoning, yeah.
There's 5 or 6 other things.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's not, economic development is it's not nipping at my heels every day.
you don't have 16 contractors sitting in
Right,
your
and
office.
you guys are all in business, you know how that works. Oftentimes, you have to focus on the forest fires and the brush fires, and you just, it's how it.
When we had an economic development staff person, that person wore many hats also.
Oh, I remember. So it's just a concept that came to mind when I was reading through the plan, and I just didn't know where, because it really does come out of the city's desire for staff also.
Yeah.
So, all right.
It almost feels like you're speaking as if you were intimately related with that.
I remember the guy very well.
What are the current CRA projects that the city is considering?
Well, there's debt currently that Sierra has that's paying off the C5 building and the Cape Center.
Okay.
The CRA funded the lift station. I think you've already got the whole list of things
Yeah,
that
it's
we've
in,
done with
it's
this.
in the packet.
So the things that
In the
we're
packet.
considering,
Yeah.
is that the question?
Yeah, those are the things that are already funded. She's asking what's on the deck to be potential.
There's-
Is that correct?
Right.
There's really two right now,
Okay.
and the big one is the Presidential Streets Master Plan.
Okay.
And the other one is the Civic Hub. And what's interesting is we had a Civic Hub workshop with the council last month, and we realized that those two projects really kind of combine. The Civic Hub is in the presidential streets, and a large part of the Civic Hub is infrastructural improvements that are going to be common to the presidential streets. So, I mean, we could almost think of, if we wanted to talk about funding something, we could possibly just start with a combined thing of maybe the Civic Hub plus a number of streets. That's what we put our weight into with the CRA, and then maybe pledged revenue to get a loan to make that happen. And the outcome of that is the Center Street Basin benefits enormously from stormwater improvements right now
Yeah.
at today's prices. And I know that's behind the thoughts of the CRA board member who talked to me the other day too about having you weigh in on this. Because we've got these pretty pictures coming in now of what these things are going to look like. Now it's time to get serious about how we're going to pay for them. And the CRA is going to have to be the lion's share. Speaking of the CRA in the Presidential Streets Master Plan, what's interesting is that the Presidential Streets Master Plan covers all of the presidential streets from A1A to the beach end. But the CRA covers from A1A to Ridgewood.
Got it.
So there's this portion beyond, that's outside of the CRA on presidential streets that could not be funded by CRA dollars, not allowed to spend it outside of the CRA. We would also have to have this board's input on how do we pay for that. And you can do it in ways like, they have to pass the sniff test. So if you say the presidential streets portion that's in the CRA is 80% of the presidential streets, and we just accept that based on the math of what it is, we could say CRA can fund 80% of any project on the presidential streets, and then another funding mechanism for the other 20%. That way you move forward with that from the beginning, it passes the sniff test all the way through, and it doesn't matter whether that street is 500 feet long or 2,500 feet long. You know, we're gonna finish this whole thing this way. And then we'd also have to think about that other funding source. And revenue taps are not knocking on our door every day. Here, got a bunch of money for you here. That doesn't happen. And there's only one that I can even think of that hasn't been tapped, and it's a political hot potato, but this board will have to wrestle with it, and I think you know what I'm talking about. It's paid parking. We're the only beach city in Brevard County that's not doing it. There are some areas in Brevard unincorporated that's not doing it, but as far as beach cities, they're all doing it. And people are saying we're leaving money on the table there. And I think that's possible. But you pit that against the small town feel that we love so much. And it challenges that potentially. That's why it's a hot potato. But you'll get to wrestle with that, I think, in the near future.
All right. Well, I think our first agenda item will definitely be going through the Economic Development Action Plan.
Yep.
Come back with our 5 top things that we want to talk about on that in January. That'll help give us our framework. We have our standing meetings figured out. And then from there, if we decide we want to add a meeting to pick up the conversations from the CRA, because they will have hopefully met between now and January.
Potentially. I know
Potentially.
that,
I know they just canceled their meeting. I just got the notice.
yeah, because that CRA board would have been seated with the outgoing council member,
Right, got it.
which is kind of wonky.
Yeah, understood.
Yeah.
So we'll have some comments coming from them also probably by that point. Anybody else have anything they want to put on the agenda for January?
Not necessarily January, but what about the interest in the aquarium presentation?
How does the rest of the board feel about that?
I think it's a good idea for, like, one of the board members to be an ambassador of the community, or of 2. That would take away some of the job that I think that you were talking to, like go to business, like ribbon cuttings, maybe make a public appearance at the port, just to say we're part of this. I think I'll help you with that. We can go set up a meeting and maybe possibly have them come and tell us, everything about, have a city meeting with them. I think it'd be a good idea. Another one maybe. But I think we should be a little bit more involved. I know that you guys are pressed. I know you are, but there's not a problem for, I think we've all done like public speaking, public service. It wouldn't be hard for a few of us to get together for, ribbon cuttings on, like, try to get them all in one day, bunch them, whatever, but yeah. Meet with the aquarium, set up, meetings, just to find out a little bit more about what's going on in local businesses, get to know them.
Literally, we do get requests to attend those functions, and they're hit or miss with staff.
Right, I'm sure.
But if the board wanted to appoint a liaison, principal liaison for those
Yeah.
kinds of things, I would be glad to give that information, the contact info to, say, the chamber, for example, who schedules a lot of these. And they would just contact that board member themselves and say, on behalf of the city, would you represent
Right.
the city?
Oh, I
at
can
these events?
contact, I'm friends with them too. Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah.
Either or, yeah, so.
If
let's
the
do
board
ribbon
wants to
cutting and stuff
appoint
like
a
that, yeah.
point of contact for that, we can.
How does
we can do
everybody
that.
feel about that? Do we want to,
My only perspective would be if you limited it to one person, then that's your single point of failure, right? If you just said, hey, listen, board, here's an event, if you're going to attend.
I see that also, but I also see that I would want to have one person who is the designated person, and then we can notice everybody else. But just so that there is, if it's open to everybody, everybody's going to assume everybody else is going, versus, yes, I can.
If it funneled through one
If
person.
it funneled through one person, they say, yes, I can go to that, I've got it in. If it's not something that fits on their calendar, or there's two people, or something like that, that's where my concern is if it's an open invitation.
Invite, yeah,
Yeah, if it's an
yeah.
open invite, then it doesn't have, someone's not monitoring it, for lack of a better
Right.
point of
There's
view.
no, you know, it's.
So I could
yeah,
certainly support a
accountability.
single point of contact, but any of us could go to
Oh,
any.
absolutely. Yeah.
So, yeah, good.
And we just have to be mindful that we don't represent the city council, we have to be mindful of
Right.
what we say, what we agree to, things of that nature, so that we don't end up having a conversation with the city attorney that we don't want to have. I mean, that's just to be careful as we, represent the city and the public.
If we're gonna do this, is there any way that the invite can go out to the whole board and that somebody, like the secretary that always monitors our requests, like meeting, if we're gonna attend or not, can say, make sure somebody responds, rather than having one person as a point of contact, just because I've been in situations where boards have had one person as a point of contact and that it becomes like a power, like that person becomes well-known at these things and it disrupts the power distribution.
That's a great
Oh,
point.
you mean it gets political, is that what you're trying to say?
Yeah, it's a great point.
So, yeah.
I'll use my wife's philosophy about inviting people to parties. Invite them all and have them sort it out. So.
And leave early. No, I'm just
Yeah.
kidding.
So what we could do, Madam Chair, is just, if the board members are all interested, we can forward all of your contact info to, say, the chamber and ask them to include you as
They will, yeah.
representatives.
Yeah.
And just email every one of you, and you decide whether you're going to go or not.
What if we want to opt out of that option? Because my calendar's so tight, I know I can't add much.
Then,
We'll figure it out. We'll go ahead and invite the entire board. I think
Yeah.
that's the feeling of the board,
Yeah.
the representatives who are here.
Okay.
So we'll go ahead, share that information as potential contacts to be out in the community moving forward. As to the aquarium presentation, I also serve on the on the zoo board. I think the best solution for that is I will touch base with the Aquarium Council and see when they are having one of their next events in which
Perfect.
they are discussing the master plan, the program, and all of that, and make sure that the board as a whole gets a invite. And then from there, if we need further information, I don't want to take up meeting time
Sure.
with it, because we'd have going through this action plan is going to take a lot of work on the bulk of the meeting. How do you guys feel about that as we get invited to an event that's discussing the future of the aquarium and what's happening with it? Would that meet the need? And if not, I don't have a problem reaching out to the aquarium and saying we need a full presentation. It's really what you guys are more comfortable with.
I think keep it soft initially, just an intro, that's perfect, yep.
Okay. All right.
I agree.
So I'll take that as an action item. Put it on my list right now while I'm thinking about it.
So what about time, Don, knowing that you are pretty intimate with this action plan and the top 5, do you think the 6 to 8?
I think we should plan 6 to 8 and hope for 6 to 7:30.
Good deal.
That way Scott knows what time he's having dinner.
Yeah.
Is everybody comfortable with that?
Yes.
Is staff comfortable with that?
yes, ma'am.
All right. All right. What other business do we need to do? Somebody remind me, please.
Public participation, we skipped over that on the agenda.
Oh, where'd my agenda go? All right. Is there any public participation that would like to be heard? Seeing none. Any other items that need to come before the board? And I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
All in favor?
Hi.
So moved. I'll even tap on that one.